Okay, I think we're going to get started. So I just wanted to say hello to everyone. We just want to ask before we get started, just for everyone to make sure that their microphones are on mute. As these virtual sessions are new, just bear with us for any kind of technical difficulties that may arise. So welcome all of you to the University of Toronto's IMG CARM session. My name is Swisha and I'm a second year resident in the program currently. And I'm one of the members of the CARMS committee this year. Prior to starting my residency at U of T, I actually trained in Ireland at the University of Limerick, and I came into this program through the IMG stream. So I'll pass it on to Ziad, who's one of our other CARMS committee members.
Hey everyone. Thanks, Felicia. So my name is Ziad, also a second year resident and part of the CAMS committee as well. Before I started my residency, I'm actually from Saudi Arabia, and that's where I did my medical training. I actually entered the program through the visa training stream. I welcome everyone to this information session, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
So thank you all again for joining us virtually, and we're really looking forward to sharing our program with you guys and all the wonderful things that make it so special. So we have kind of applicants from all over the world, which is super exciting for us today. Our agenda, maybe Ziad, if you don't mind going to the next slide. This will be our agenda for the day. So the session will first start off with a talk from our program director, a quick hello and welcome, and then our future chief, Dr. Gabe C, will give us a bit of a presentation and overview about the program. And then after that, we'll have a Q&A session with some of our residents and Dr. Atkinson. And then we'll have some breakout rooms with some other IMGs and be able to ask more kind of personal one-on-one questions.
You want to start with
So I'll pass it back to you, Ziad.
From the War Heroes page.
Yeah. So to start, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that on which Kites operates. For thousands of years, it has been a traditional land of the Herald Wounded and Pigeon, First Nations, the Senecas, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit Today, Toronto is home to Indigenous people from across the Turtle Island. Second is committed to a that includes
the little yellow box. I'm like, oh, no,
and is grateful for the opportunity to share this land and caring for children.
So annoying.
Yeah.
And I don't know for you, but just
Alicia?
so long. Just that.
I just want to, before we go forward, I think that there's a few people that aren't muted. So if you guys can just make sure that you guys are muted, just because we're getting a lot of background noise. That would be super helpful. Awesome. So I think we're going to get started with Dr. Atkinson. So Dr. Atkinson, if you want to kind of take it away.
Thanks so much, guys. So a huge welcome to everybody this morning. This morning for us, and I assume that for different people, it's in different parts of the world. And we're really excited that all of you could make the time to join us this morning. And we hope it will be a really great use of your day. We hope at the end of the day that you'll say this was an excellent use of 1.5 to 2 hours of your time. So a huge welcome to the information session about the residency training program at the University of Toronto. I just want to thank our residents. So this morning you're going to meet a few of our pediatric residents, many of our international medical graduate residents, but I do want to thank our CARMS committee, Felicia, Ziad, Kelsey, who I don't think is here this morning, right? But we've been doing a few town halls recently, and the amount of work that has gone into this to make it work well and to make it really, I guess, informative for all of you has been enormous. And so huge thanks for that, guys. So I wanted to welcome everybody. What we hope this morning is that the time we'll spend together, we can specifically address some of the questions and areas you'd like to discuss, particularly coming as an international medical graduate into the CARMS match. So we know and understand that there are unique and specific questions and issues that you may want to discuss, and we're really happy to help you with that this morning. Just to let you know, we have a fair amount of experience with IMGs in our program. The IMG process through CARMS started in 2007. That was the first year. And at that time, we formed a separate selection committee because we understood and knew that the IMG applicant pool was different and needed special attention to be able to ensure that we paid and understood the application process really well. And also we wanted to have a selection committee that also had IMG staff on it. And so we have a separate and unique process for people like yourselves who are applying to our program. Just to let you know that in Canada and in Ontario, there are a number of international medical graduate positions that are allocated to programs specifically. And the IMG process was created a number of years ago in order to ensure that newcomers to Canada and Canadians who studied abroad had access to residency training programs where they were competing within a similar applicant pool. And so it was created and I think has worked quite well. I'd love it if we have more positions, but just to let you know that this year in the upcoming CARMS match, the University of Toronto Paediatric program has been given 3 positions. We had 4 last year. We've been cut 1. And that's something that we don't unfortunately have any control over because the spots are controlled by the Ministry of Health. I don't think that spot disappeared. I just think it probably went to a different program. So anyway, we would love it if we had more, but unfortunately that's kind of where we are this year. We do get a significant number of applicants to our program. Not everyone that applies to our program is specifically interested in pediatrics as their first choice, but certainly there are a lot that are. And we're more than happy moving forward today to make sure that your questions about process as much as we can are answered in a fair and transparent way. And I also really look forward to all of you getting a really great sense of our program and deciding whether or not it's the program for you. We have an unbelievable group of people that train in our program, and it is that body of people that make this program what it is. And I think being a part of that is just a positive experience and just leads to more positivity. We have, the approach in our program is a growth mindset. We look at things we want to make better and embrace those opportunities, and all of our residents function in that way. So I believe that we have a wonderful training ground and a wonderful positive learning environment, but I'm completely 100% biased. And I admit that right here in front of all of you today. So I'm going to stop there and let the rest of the morning unfold.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. A. So next we would like to invite our incoming chief for 2021, Dr. Gabe C. And he's going to speak a little bit more about the structure of our training program and what it's like to train here in pediatrics at the University of Toronto. So I'll let him get started there.
Hey everyone, can you hear me and see my screen? Awesome. So I'm so happy to be here to tell you about the pediatric residency program. Usually this is done by the current chiefs, who I'll show a picture of later, but I'm filling in today. So my name is Gabe. I am a current R3, so a 3rd-year resident, and I'm going to be chief next year. So when you guys are R1s, I was actually an IMG as well. So I went to med school in the UK. So spent 3 years in St. Andrews and 3 years in Edinburgh. I did 1 year of kind of intern training in the UK before coming here. So I kind of appreciate where you guys are at right now. So this is not me. This is Justin and Lauren, our current chiefs, who are super amazing and doing an awesome job. I think they both have clinical duties today, so couldn't make it. So let's talk about Sick Kids. So Sick Kids is the largest hospital in Canada. It's a tertiary hospital, has all the services and all the patients and all the pathology you could ever want to see. There are over 300 inpatient beds. And we get about 80,000 emergency visits per year. So that's like between 200 to 300 patients per day on average. So that's a huge amount of people. Obviously there's more in the winter time, but that's a lot of kids coming through the emergency department. In the outpatient clinic, there's 150,000, which is something around 400, is that right? 500, 600 patients that come through the outpatient clinics every day. So again, a lot of patients. We have a lot of different clinics throughout the hospital. In terms of the core residents, we have about 80 core residents. That includes the IMG stream, the CMG stream, and we have some pediatric neurology residents. In terms of faculty, there are 165 faculty in the hospital, making the ratio of faculty to resident 2 to 1. And I think that's really important because I think the faculty add a lot to this program. We have a really, really strong faculty, people who are really supportive with mentorship, research, which I'll talk about later. So our program, so here's some pictures. It's kind of weird seeing these pictures given the changes with COVID. I feel like everyone should have been socially distancing, but this was a long time ago. So we have a 4-year core program. And then after 4 years of general pediatrics, you can do a subspecialty fellowship, which is usually 2 to 3 years. I'll just go over some of the pictures because I think they're funny. The top left is actually my year. We have a yearly kind of spring formal, and there was a professional photographer. So that's the current PGY 3s. On the bottom left, I think the PGY 2s in the PGY 1 year, they went on a resident retreat in the middle of winter for some reason. So they're enjoying the snow there. On the bottom right, we do a yearly baseball game with faculty as well as residents. So this is the resident team. We lose every year to the faculty and the children, mainly because we can't let the children lose. But it's hosted at one of the staff's house, Dr. Moore Hepburn. So we have a really nice day. We have a barbecue afterwards. We all go to her house. So it's a really nice experience. And then the last one is, my face is covering it, but it looks like it's the current PGY 4s and they're doing something fun. Let me see if I can see it. Yeah, exactly. So let's now talk about PGY 1. So this is a really fun and exciting year. As an IMG, I was extremely scared starting PGY 1 because it was a different system, different hospital, different way of doing things. But I found everyone to be super supportive. I actually started on a ward block. So you end up doing three ward blocks. And that's on the general pediatric ward where you manage patients who are admitted to hospital. There's one block that is called night float and SCU. So you do 2 weeks of the night float system where you just work overnight. And then 2 weeks of SCU, which is kind of like it's called streamlined care unit. And that's where you see more bread and butter pediatrics. So osteomyelitis, periorbital cellulitis, rule out sepsis. So that's a really nice block where you can kind of almost act as a senior and kind of take the lead, given that the pediatric cases are a little bit more straightforward. As I mentioned before, we have a really strong emergency department that's usually very highly rated. So you spend 6 weeks in the emergency department. You see a whole host of problems from kind of bread and butter viral infections, bronchiolitis, asthma, to more complicated patients. There's so many patients who have subspecialty services at sick kids hospitals, so they often come to our emergency department. So, we're also a major trauma hospital, so we see traumas as well. We do 4 weeks of care of the newborn, so that's spent at community hospitals with level 2 NICUs to kind of get exposure to first, what is a newborn? How do you examine a well newborn? And what are common NICU issues? You do 4 weeks of surgery. So you do 2 weeks of general surgery and 2 weeks of urology. This is kind of one of the examples of the strength of our program. It used to be that we did 4 weeks of general surgery, which was great, but we realized that having urology exposure is also really, really helpful. So now it's 2 weeks of surgery and 2 weeks of urology. You do 8 weeks of community pediatrics. We have really strong links with some of the community hospitals, so you spend some time in the community. You do 4 weeks of adolescent medicine, which is a huge subset of our patient population. We see babies from 0 to 18. So there's a big proportion of those patients who are in the adolescent range. So you work with patients with eating disorders, kind of high risk youth. You do 4 weeks of infectious disease. It also used to be 2 weeks, but we realized that, infection in children is common. So it's been extended to 4 weeks, which is, I think, a huge plus. You do 4 weeks of a mix of dermatology, allergy, as well as immunology. So here at SickKids, there's eczema clinics. So you'll see a lot of eczema, which is common, as well as some of the more rare kind of primary immunodeficiencies. And then you get 2 weeks of dedicated research time where you can meet with mentors. I'll talk more about research later, but you can kind of develop your research skills. And then 4 weeks of vacation. In terms of call, we do have a night float system for 2 weeks of the year, you do 5 p.m. till 8 a.m. every other night, as well as weekends. So that decreases the amount of call that you do to 1 call in every 4 to 5 nights. In some of the rotations, so for example, infectious disease, adolescent medicine, emergency, you do call in a different way. So it's not strictly kind of 24-hour call. And this is a picture of the PGY1s, I think right when residency was starting, and it was all very socially distanced. And then this is usually orientations in person. I don't know what this coming year is going to look like, but it was all via Zoom. Apparently Lauren and Justin sent everyone Uber Eats vouchers so they could all have Uber Eats together in their own homes. Okay, so PGY2. This is kind of our subspecialty or our ologies year. So you spend a lot of time in the subspecialty services, and that's one of the huge strengths of SickKids. We have all the subspecialties, and you will really see it all. So a lot of these subspecialties have fellows, and that I find is also a strength because the fellows are really, really keen to teach. So you get a good exposure to a lot of cases. You get teaching from fellows as well as attending staff. So I won't go into every rotation specifically. I will highlight that the call schedule is a little bit different. So we do a night float system throughout the entire year. We call it Maple and Oak. I'm not sure why, but they're nice names of trees. So when you're covering Maple overnight, you cover cardiology, nephrology, gastroenterology, rheumatology, endo. Is that right, guys? I think that's right. So you pretty much split the subspecialty services between Maple and Oak. So you always have 2 PGY2s who are on call together. And it's actually kind of fun. The nights vary. They're not always, you're up all night, and you have really, really good support. There's always a fellow who you can call for advice. So I actually really enjoyed Maple and Oak. You get experience dealing with a lot of ward issues, as well as really, really sick children and complicated patients, but you're always very, very well supported by your fellow. And you can also, talk through things with your PGY2 you're on call with. Okay, and this is a picture of the PGY2s at what looks like a really nice outdoor patio. So PGY3, so this is, I'm biased, of course, but the best group of people currently in the hospital. So PGY3 is a really, really great year. I'm almost halfway through it, which is kind of crazy. But this is really the year where you step up and you take the lead. You're senior in a lot of the rotations that you do. So you spend 8 weeks on the wards as senior resident. And it's really interesting going from PGY1, where you're the junior, to PGY3 being the senior, leading a team. There's usually a few medical students, there's junior residents, there's physician's assistants. So you really get to take charge, make decisions, kind of see sick patients. So it's a really, really nice kind of year to realize how much you've learned and kind of apply all the knowledge you learned in PGY2. You do 4 weeks of CCRT and IC. So CCRT is kind of our ICU response team. So if there's a sick patient who's not in the ICU, you'll see them. And then you do 2 weeks in the intermediate care unit, which is IC. And that's kind of the bridge between the ward and the ICU. So you can take patients who have higher ventilatory settings, as well as patients who need like closer nursing care. You do 4 weeks in the PICU, as well as 8 weeks in the NICU. So you do 4 weeks at St. Mike's Hospital, which is a community hospital in downtown Toronto. And then you do 4 weeks at Mount Sinai Hospital, which is just across the street. So Mount Sinai Hospital, you manage a lot of very preterm babies. They resuscitate, sometimes up to 22 weeks. So you have the exposure of kind of, being in that resuscitation of very premature babies. They actually have a really amazing facility where there's a resuscitation room with 5 different incubators. So sometimes like there are 5 babies and like multiple resusces going on at the same time. So really, really amazing learning opportunity, and a lot of patients. It's a very busy birthing unit as well. Again, you do 8 weeks of emergency medicine, which I'm on right now, and that's why I'm able to be at home right now, because we do shift work. But again, you get to review with medical students and juniors, so you kind of take more of a senior role. You do 4 weeks of ambulatory, which is outpatient clinic. 4 weeks of genetics and metabolics, which is mainly outpatient clinic. And you have 4 weeks of elective, where you kind of can go wherever you want, do electives, and then 8 weeks actually of selective research and vacation. In terms of call, in most of the blocks, it's about 1 in 4 call. So 1 call in every 4 nights. There are exceptions. So for emergency medicine, you do shift work. The PICU is night float, and elective and selective research vacation, you don't have call. And this picture was actually at Regine. So he's one of the R3s. He got married and invited all of us. So that was a really nice evening. Another picture of us when we were young PGY1s. PGY4, I won't talk too much about because it will probably change once you guys start. But you do a mix of community pediatrics. You do some pediatric consults at sick kids, and then you rotate through a few other kind of subspecialty pediatric rotations that would be very useful as a general pediatrician going forward. And this is just another picture of the PGY4s back when life was normal. So call. So this is an area that before I started residency at Sick Kids, I was super scared of. In the UK, we don't do 24-hour call. It's a very different system. So I was extremely scared. But I've actually realized, calls actually, no one loves call because you're in hospital, you stay in hospital for 24 hours. But it is a great learning opportunity. When you do pediatric call, you're dealing with ward issues. And it's really, you are usually the first call to these ward issues. So there's less backups, you have more responsibility, and you're admitting patients overnight. So you start from square one, you take the full history, you do your assessment, you make a plan. So it's, it's a phenomenal learning opportunity. Of course, you're always well supported by the senior resident. There's other members in the hospital that are there for you. There's also your staff who you can call at any point. And there's ICU support if you're ever worried. So although call is not fun, we try to find ways of making it enjoyable. So often we'll make McFlurries together. Often we'll order Uber Eats together. We'll try to have dinner together. And we support each other throughout the call. So I was really scared for call, but after the first few calls, you get used to it and you get a lot more comfortable. So vacation. So we get 4 weeks of dedicated vacation per year, and we actually schedule that within 2-week blocks so that you don't miss out on any learning. Some programs you have to kind of apply for vacation per block, so that means you'll miss a week or 2 weeks of a rotation, and they don't always honor it. So it's actually really, really nice to have your vacation scheduled immediately before you even start your year, so you know when you have time off. You also have 7 professional days per year, and you can use that for whatever reason that you want. And you get 5 days off for either the Christmas period or the New Year period. During the holiday, you can see the bottom left picture here. We have something called holiday rounds where, every Wednesday they have grand rounds, and then during one of the grand round sessions during December, all of the PGY years make a holiday skit video, and everyone watches it. It's usually making fun of each other, making fun of some things in the hospital, and it's probably the most well-attended rounds in the whole year. So it's very well attended. We also have protected time each year for a 1 to 2 day resident retreat. So all the residents in your year don't have call, they go somewhere and just have a good time. So I'm going to be talking now about a huge strength of our program, Dr. Atkinson. So I think, being at Sick Kids, it's a huge teaching hospital. There's a lot of learners, a lot of fellows, and a lot of competing interests in terms of patient care, et cetera, et cetera. And especially at Sick Kids, at every program, but especially at Sick Kids, I think it's really important to have someone who's experienced, someone who's well respected, and someone who advocates strongly for the residents. And that's exactly what Dr. Atkinson is. Before, when I was interviewing, everyone kept talking about, that being a major strength of the program, and I kind of brushed it off, like how important can it be? But throughout my years of training and working with her, it truly is a huge strength of the program, having someone who is such an advocate, who isn't afraid to kind of stir the pot and make sure that we're well represented. So we also, every year, we do what they call a fireside chat, where you actually meet with her and discuss kind of any questions, any concerns, any career goals that you have with her. So that's a really nice opportunity to meet with her. So now let's talk about education, research, and mentorship. So education, there's loads of formal and informal teaching while you're just rotating through your rotations. So when you're on pediatrics, where you spend a lot of your time, there's pretty much formal teaching every day. But we also have protected teaching every Tuesday afternoon, where subspecialties come and chat with us. But you will get a lot of teaching throughout every rotation, especially on your second year in your ologies, you'll get a lot of teaching. Sick Kids, there's loads of research going on. So there's a lot of people doing a lot of different type of research. So if you're interested in quality improvement, basic sciences, anything, we can find you a research mentor to help you kind of grow your research skills. And we have staff and senior resident mentors that you're assigned to. So in the bottom left, we have kind of informal mentors where they take you out for dinner or you do something fun with them at least once a year. So I think Dr. Friedman, who's on the left-hand side, he had people over to do kind of a gnocchi making dinner. So that's a really fun thing to do. You have a dedicated research mentor and a career mentor that you'll meet with as well. Okay, so we have a lot of committees here at Sick Kids. So some are elected, so you apply for them and you're voted by your co-residents, and some where you're selected onto the committee. So we have, I don't think I'll go into detail about them, but lots of committees, so a lot of ways that you can get involved and make the program better. I'll highlight a few committees in particular. So one is the Advocacy Committee. Toronto is extremely multicultural. There's a lot of different people who come from a lot of different places around the world. We have a very large refugee population. So it sets us up very well for doing a lot of really amazing advocacy. One of the things that we do is an elementary and high school outreach. So we actually did this 2 weeks ago. We usually actually go to a school and teach them about health And this year we had to do it via Zoom. So we answered questions about COVID, we talked about wellness, and it was a really, really well-received outreach event. We have something called the POP Clinic, which is a pediatric outreach clinic, which happens on Saturdays throughout the year, where children who maybe don't have health coverage will be referred to this clinic, and we provide free services. We do a comprehensive assessment, history, physical exam. There's usually a dietitian who's there to support us. And that's a really, really nice way of kind of helping children who are marginalized seek healthcare. We have parent nights, as well as kind of a Fir Grove Community Center night, where we meet with parents and teach them about kind of how to raise healthy children, how to practice like safe health practices. And that's usually in the evenings, and residents will talk to parents and kind of give advice that way. There's also huge opportunities to actually advocate for children on a governmental and policy level. So a few years ago, he's an eMERGE staff now, but Dr. Rosenfield, he kind of did an advocacy event on button batteries, and how button batteries are actually causing kind of a lot of ischemic and GI surgical problems. So that was one of the advocacy events, advocacy things that he did. So Wellness Committee. So this is a big committee in our program. They do lots and lots of amazing work. So one of the things they do is within our Pearl sessions, they have something called ice cream rounds, where they bring us all ice cream and we have kind of a facilitated discussion about difficult things that we're going through, maybe some difficult patients, patient deaths, and really have a forum to chat about, difficulties and wellness issues at work. We have something called Balance Group, where it's actually a more formal discussion about difficult patient encounters that's facilitated sometimes by a palliative care doctor, sometimes by a social worker. And that's an opportunity to kind of not commiserate, but discuss difficult issues and kind of look forward and see how we can better handle those issues in the future. We have resident mentorship. So PGY1s being mentored by PGY3s. So I have two PGY1s, they're now PGY2s. And we meet for dinner and beers, and we're planning a driving range excursion soon. And you can kind of see some of the Zoom videos that we've done since COVID started. So on the left-hand side, this wasn't actually a wellness event, but some of the PGY3s met just for a hangout session, and we all did masks. And on the right-hand side, we actually did a workout hosted by Jamie, one of our PGY2s. So there's also global health opportunities. So there's opportunity for residents, probably not right now, but maybe in the future, to go abroad and do some global health work during their elective time. I'm also part of the Global Health Education Initiative. So it's actually a certificate program where you have lectures throughout the year, and you have really, really amazing world-renowned speakers who talk about global health issues. So you can also be a part of that if you're interested. So our strengths. Dr. Atkinson, as I mentioned before, we see a lot of patients. I think that's one of our big strengths, being a huge hospital like Sick Kids. You get high patient volume. You get, you get a lot of bread and butter, but you also get the patients who, there's one case or, 30 cases in the world. So that's a really unique opportunity. We have really strong community links. So you get a lot of time in the community where you can kind of work more with general pediatrics. Amazing protected teaching time, both as in when you're on service on GenPs as well as on Tuesday afternoons. Really, really great research opportunities. And also we have a lot of fun. So top right picture in our yearly holiday party, I was Santa. I know I trick a lot of people. I look like Santa. And on the bottom, I actually don't know what they're doing, but they look like they're eating something really tasty. But that's on the wards. So I'll talk about common misconceptions and common myths about sick kids and kind of address them. Some people say we don't get enough hands-on experience. And I would say that, I feel like I've had a lot of hands-on experience, especially this year. As a R3, you are co-team leader for the hospital. So you actually are the first person and you're the leader of any code blue that happens. So you're inside the room, you're giving orders, you're leading that entire team. And that's an amazing hands-on experience. Some people say there's too many residents. I would counter that by saying, there are a lot of patients. So there's always enough work to go around. When you're on call, no one's ever thinking like, oh, I just really wish, there were less residents so I could do more. Calls are busy. You see a lot of patients. So even though there are a lot of residents, I think that's actually a strength because you have a lot of colleagues that you get to know really well. People say there are too many fellows, but again, the fellows are a great support. So, they're kind of a step between a resident and a staff. So they're, sometimes more keen to do teaching, and there's a bit less of a dynamic. You can come with them for any questions that you have, and they're always very happy to answer them. People say there's not enough bread and butter pediatrics. It's true that at Sick Kids you will see probably more complex and rare pathology than you might at other centers, but we have really strong community links. You spend a lot of time in the community seeing a lot of bread and butter pediatrics, and we still do admit patients with kind of bread and butter problems in pediatrics. I always think that, if you can manage bronchiolitis in a patient with multiple comorbidities, you can also manage a previously healthy patient with bronchiolitis. So this is our last slide, but this is next year's chiefs, which is me on the left and my colleague Priya Sayal on the right-hand side. So I didn't realize that this was supposed to be like a nice picture of us. So Priya obviously looks amazing, and I look less so. But we will be the chiefs for next year. So when you guys are all PGY1s. So I'm so looking forward to meeting some of you guys, maybe on the interview trail and maybe as PGY1s. I wish you guys all the best. I'm staying for the session, so happy to answer any questions. And I'll also pop my email in the chat right now, so you can feel free to email me.
Okay, thank you so much, Gabe, for all this amazing information. So now we're going to enter the large group discussion and questions. We hope to start with some of the pre-submitted questions that you guys have submitted in the forms. But you also can feel free to leave any questions either in the chat, or you can just chat to us privately as well, and we'll make sure that we answer all your questions. And as a reminder, after the question and answer period, we'll have some time having some breakout rooms with some of our residents in a smaller groups, and you'll have even more opportunities to ask more questions and have more in-depth discussions as well. Okay, so I'll pass it on to Felicia.
Perfect. Thank you, Ziad. I just wanted to take an opportunity to introduce a few of our fellow residents that are on the call as well, and many of them who are IMGs. And I just want to give a little bit more background about my own training. So like I said, I'm an IMG. I trained in Ireland. I previously did my undergraduate degree at McMaster in nursing and worked at Sick Kids for a few years, and then went over to Ireland and did my training there in the graduate entry program. And then I did a year of internship, and then I started here in the pediatric program. And so I'm going to pass it on to Kelsey, who's one of our other CARMS committee members, who joined us just into Gabe's talk. So I'll let her introduce herself there, and then we'll introduce some of our IMGs.
Awesome. Hi, guys. I hope you can hear me. My name is Kelsey. I'm another PGY2, also part of the CARMS committee this year, and coming from you from one of our beautiful sites that we also get to work at, Holland Bloorview. So very excited to virtually meet all of you guys and excited to hear your questions and tell you more about the program.
Thanks, Kelsey. So we're going to introduce some of our IMGs. So I see Warner's on the line there. So Warner, if you want to introduce yourself and give a little bit of a background, that'd be awesome.
Hey guys, my name's Warner. Like Felicia, I also studied in Ireland, but I'm from Canada originally, around Hamilton. I studied at a school called UCC, or University College Cork in Ireland.
Awesome, thanks, Warner. I see Yolanda's on the line as well. So maybe I'll pass it on to you, Yolanda.
Hey everyone, my name is Yolanda. I'm also an IMG. I studied at UCC a year after Warner. And I'm also from Canada. I'm from Vaughan, so just north of Toronto.
Awesome. Thanks, Yolanda. I think Ahmed is on the line. So maybe Ahmed will let you introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ahmed. I'm also one of the second year PEDS residents. I did medical school at University of Alexandria in Egypt. And yeah, I'm here.
Ahmed's currently sitting outside sick kids. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes. I'm just getting a little tan. The weather's nice today.
I don't think Nora, Elise, or Ali are on the line just yet, but they will be joining us shortly for the breakout rooms. Nora is a trainee also from the University of Limerick. She trained, she was the year below myself. And Elise trained in Ireland as well at the RCSI. And Ali is actually one of our visa trainees who's also going to join us. So I'm going to pass it on to Kelsey. Oh no, I think Kelsey is frozen. So I might just take over for a quick second. So we're going to start with kind of our more broad questions, and then we can get into some more specifics. So Dr. A, perhaps we'll kind of start with one of the most common questions. So are there any changes that will be made to the application process due to COVID-19, especially in regards to students being unable to complete visiting electives, and how will this affect their ability to match to the program this year?
Absolutely. So we get asked this question a lot by both IMGs and CMGs because everybody has been under the same restrictions because of the pandemic. So our selection committees met last week to sort of discuss our process for this year, as we always do. And that included a very large discussion about the pandemic. And in addition, of course, everything has been shifted by 6 weeks into the future because of trying to allow students to have a bit more time to finish off their clerkship rotations and also do electives, at least locally. So we came up with about 7 pieces of the application that we think are going to be affected by COVID that we're going to be very mindful of. Obviously, one of them is elective opportunities. So for both CMGs and IMGs, electives have not been allowed since March 16th. So in addition to yourselves not being able to do electives and visit programs, the CMGs also have not been allowed to visit programs. So people have been allowed to, the Canadian medical graduates were off for 3 months and they came back on July 6th and have since that time have only been allowed to do electives at their own schools. And so they also don't have the experience of visiting other schools and you know, exploring those and seeing if those are an option. So we're going to, of course, take into account that people have not had an opportunity to come here. Having said that, we have never had a requirement that people did electives at our own institution in order to be considered, because we know how challenging it can be to get electives. And for international medical graduates, we also understand how challenging it can be to get electives electives, period, when you're already competing with Canadians where all the schools are protective of their own slots for CMGs. So we've been very liberal in terms of that piece of the application anyway. Other things that we know are going to be affected are letters of reference. If you've not met a lot of folks from other places, you know, the diversity of your letters may not be what it was. That's going to be the same for everybody in the match. So we're also going to be paying attention to that. We'll still require one letter to be from a pediatrician of the group of letters, but certainly they don't all have to be from a pediatrician. I would also suggest for letters that you really try to make sure the folks that you ask to provide you with letters can really speak to you as an individual, your clinical work, your clinical competence. I know some of you may get research letters as well, which is also fine. But I think the letters really, in my mind, fill in the gaps where an application can't speak to certain things. So for example, if we see your transcripts and your MSPR from your school, and we look at what electives you did or didn't do and your volunteering, etc., what we don't know is, you know, what do you like to work with? What do other people think about your clinical skills, that kind of thing. So I would just be careful in choosing people that can speak to those, and that they don't have to be pediatricians to answer those questions. So that's another piece. The other thing is volunteer work. If people are interested in that, has been shut down. So we recognize that those things will look different as well. So all of that to say, we've been very mindful. We've actually created a small document for ourselves just to remind us about these different pieces of the application that are going to look a little different this year. And we will be taking that into consideration for all applicants.
Great, thanks, Dr. A, for that. Having some unstable internet. Another question that we had from some of our applicants is, where do most IMGs come from?
Oh, that's a good question. So I can tell you there's been a shift in the applicant pool from 2007, when this process first started, to 2019, which would be the last data we would have. So in the beginning, the International Medical Graduate Process was developed for newcomers to Canada, who had done medical training, whether it be completed or not, had done at least medical school, sometimes residency, and sometimes been working as practicing physicians of various types. And the theme was created for newcomers to Canada, and then adapted to also include Canadians who studied abroad, because again, the foundation of the IMG stream is training at a school, a medical school. IMG denotes the medical school one trains in, not the residency program if one was done. So the medical school outside of North America. So it does not include, IMGs do not include people who trained in the United States, for example, because the United States and Canada have the same standard accrediting. We have different names for accrediting bodies, but the standards are very similar. So those schools are considered as one kind of pool, as a CMG pool. And so what we've noticed over the years is it was initially mostly newcomers to Canada, and over time, it sort of balanced out to be about 50-50 newcomers to Canada, Canadians who had chosen to study abroad for a lot of different reasons. And then it sort of, at one point, was an increase in Canadians who studied abroad, then it decreased again. I would say it's fairly balanced now between those two groups. So I would say that we get applicants, honestly, I don't even know if there's a predominant area. Europe, the Caribbean, Australia, the Middle East, India, Pakistan, Poland, Eastern Europe, Western Europe. I can honestly tell you, I think I've seen an applicant from like every medical school almost on the planet. Like it's really quite remarkable and fascinating to be able to read, have a privilege of reading these applications. I think that Canadians who study abroad tend to go to a few focused areas. So I think Europe, so Ireland and England are fairly common, and Australia. Also the Caribbean, there's some offshore schools in the Caribbean where folks will go and do some clerkship training in the US with arrangements there. Those first Canadians who studied abroad would probably be the most common spots, I think.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Atkinson. One of the questions that we received, do most IMGs have experience before starting residency or applying, basically?
That's a really good question. You know, if you look at the two groups within the IMG pool, so Canadians who studied abroad and newcomers to Canada, for the most part, newcomers to Canada do have experience. So they've either done medical school and then internships or the equivalent in their own countries. There's a lot of countries, for example, in South America, where one has to do almost like a return of service after medical school. Everybody has to do it, and they work in rural communities for 1 to 2 years, and they may come back and do residencies. So we see folks who've done those sorts of things. We've seen folks who've done complete residencies in pediatrics applying to our program, because unfortunately, residency training outside of North America, only certain countries are recognized by our colleges, and for the most part, they are English-speaking countries. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, it's just unfortunately the way it is. So there's certain countries where the training language is not English, and the Royal College does not recognize their standards. So for example, if you've trained as a pediatrician in Brazil, for example, you would have to do your medical, you would have to train again in Canada for it to be recognized by the Royal College. So certain jurisdictions are and aren't recognized to some degree. So I would say newcomers to Canada, we often have a fairly robust experience level. I think our Canadians who study abroad, it really varies. It depends how long they decided maybe to stay. So I found that like Felicia and Gabe, like some will stay and do foundation years, which they're called in the United Kingdom, which are sort of equivalent to like a 2-year sort of internship where you sort of start to express an interest. And from there, if you stay in the UK, you go on to become hopefully a resident in their residency training pathway, which has changed a little bit over the last few years and become a little bit more formalized. So we do get some IMGs who are Canadian studying abroad who also have a bit of clinical experience, a bit more than our CMGs as well. So it's actually you guys are a very, very talented, experienced pool of candidates for us, because obviously our CMGs don't have any, other than their clerkship, wouldn't have any clinical experience when they apply to us.
Okay, thanks, Dr. A. This is another kind of big question as well. So what can IMGs do to kind of set them apart from other candidates, and how can applicants ensure they have a competitive application? And are there any specifics that we're looking for in the application?
Ooh, that's a really big question.
Yeah.
How long do we have? No, I'm just kidding. You know, I don't know that there's one answer to that question, but I totally understand where you're coming from. I think that the most important thing I think on applications to medicine, and I would say this to the Canadians as well, is authenticity. So while one has to highlight one's achievements, and that is for some people a little harder than others. I was having a conversation with some folks the other day from the University of the West Indies, and there are certain cultures who tell me we find it very difficult to like say that we think we've done well at this or that, or you look at me. And so I totally get that. But there has to be a little bit of like, hey, here's what I've done. I do think authenticity coming through on the application is really important in the interview as well. I think highlighting all of the things that you've been able to achieve and do during school, all of the things you're interested in. The personal letter, the letter of intent that's at the beginning of the application is a nice place sometimes to put this. We do ask, I think we've sort of assumed and asked IMGs to put a little bit of their training pathway in the letter of intent, or the cover, that sort of 750 word letter, just because everybody has a unique pathway to getting here in the IMG stream. And so we definitely have asked folks to be really clear about sort of how they've gotten to this decision to do pediatrics and kind of what they've done in the past. Success on some of the certifying examinations that you're required to do is important. You'll find not just for our program, but all programs across Canada, both pediatrics and others will look at those scores because they are the one thing that everyone has done. So they are the one thing that could be a little bit compared. Because we do know what a decent score is on those exams, because they do have standards, and we don't choose high scores as something we would look at. We choose very, very reasonable scores, but I think, you know, doing reasonably well on those exams is an asset for sure. Having some clinical experience within the last few years, if one is already out in practice and remote from medical school is important. That's not to say that you have to be really close to medical school to match to our program. You definitely don't. But we do know that people that have just stayed in, at least engaged in a little bit of clinical work over the time since they've finished whatever training they've done, they are more successful in our program. It's a hard transition to be out, say, for 10, 15 years from doing clinical work, and then to transition to residency can be quite challenging. So I think recency of clinical work is really helpful, highlighting interesting things that you've done, success on the standardized exams, which are transitioning. The pandemic has changed that a little bit, but the requirements are transitioning a little bit based on moving away from the evaluating exam to the qualifying exam part 1. What else? You know, if you have done research, definitely letting us know about that. We do not expect that everybody has the opportunity to do research. We know that this is not prioritized at some schools, so this is not a requirement of our program. And, you know, and just seeing what people do with their time, you know, like how have people used their time, and newcomers to Canada, how have they what have they done to sort of get into the system and try to, you know, explore it a little bit. We also recognize it's very hard to get observerships, so we don't, you know, necessarily require that as well. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's sort of some of the things I can think of. I just wonder if any of the residents who, you know, can you guys think of what are the things on your applications that you tried to make sure folks knew about or highlighted for us?
I wonder if one of our IMG residents want to add. I know that when I was doing my application in CARMS, there's so many different sections. So making sure that I put like all, you know, if I did my intern year where I put that stuff on, you know, any research experience, highlighting that. I guess any volunteer experience. Again, this might be a little challenging with COVID this year. But I think a really important thing, like Dr. A said, was like your, not even your representative, but your personal statements, and kind of going through and explaining kind of how you are as kind of like a general person. I don't know if any of the other IMGs have any other thoughts. Maybe Ahmed, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think just to kind of reiterate what everyone said, I do think that you know, highlighting unique experiences that you've been through, you know, that led you to apply to residency here, is important. And highlighting experiences, you know, whether related to clinical medicine or just, you know, life experiences that you've been through. I think this would be something unique and that may help your applications to stand out. I do think also the personal letters, you know, having spoken to other IMGs before applying, there's this misconception that people don't read personal letters, and you know, maybe not a lot of people focus on that. So, but I do think those are very important to kind of try and write your story and why you're interested in pediatrics and doing residency in Canada, I think.
And one other thing I just want to mention is we don't have a template or a phenotype that we're necessarily looking for in our program. We want our program to be as diverse as it can be. People don't have to have followed some route that we've decided is the best route to follow to get to, you know, where you are now. We really, really, really want diversity in our program, and we have intentionally selected selection committee members who will challenge each other around those discussions to be sure that we are acknowledging all kinds of experiences that people have had, because we do recognize that there are people in the IMG match who have access and there are people who do not. And we want to make sure that everybody is coming in on an equal playing field. So we're not going to, you know, necessarily, disadvantage someone who does have connections, but we will ensure that those who don't are looked at in exactly the same way. Because it's very clear that the playing field is not level within the IMG group. And we're very, very aware of that. And we spend a lot of our time discussing those issues.
Great. We have another question that I got. This one's also about exam scores. So specifically, it's about the USMLE, so the step 1, step 2 that gets written in the US. When you report your score, is this anything that we would take into account when doing our selection here at U of T, the USMLE?
Yeah, so any exam scores that are on the are listed, we definitely look at. We don't really, we can't compare USMLEs across the board or sort of think about those in the same way about the other exams, because majority of our candidates don't have them. Some do, because people are applying to the US as well, which I totally get. So we look at them, but at the end of the day, I'm not even 100% sure I understand them totally, to be honest with you, not having had to do those exams. I also understand that, you know, getting a passing score is a really hard thing. So I know we're not looking, you know, those exams, people don't get like 99% or anything. So, so while we, of course, we'll look at everything you submit, those would be a little bit less important, just because we don't have the experience with what those exams mean. And we also don't have, all candidates don't have them. Not all candidates have them. I hope that made sense, yes.
Dr. A, I might just add a quick question just about the NAC and the QE1, QE2. So this year, the NAC is now pass-fail, and the QE1, QE2. So a lot of people from internationally haven't been able to travel to Canada in order to do the NAC or even the QE2 in person. So will these exams be mandatory as part of their application? And if so, are there specific scores that are used as cutoffs?
So you know what, I thought that it was mandatory according to CARMS. We don't set those rules in our program. Those rules are set by CARMS. But I thought that one or the other was mandatory. I feel like I had an email about this. Were we?
I think from one of the last sessions, you read a U of T email that said that the NAC is still required, but the QE2 can be done instead of the NAC exam, as they're both clinical exams.
Right.
And either the EE or the QE1 can.
That's right. So I think you do have to have one or the other, right? The NAC or the QE2, right? I don't think you can have none of them.
Yeah, I think that's what that you had said yesterday, and that came from U of T specifically.
Yeah, there is a part on the CARMS website, guys, where you can look up what the requirements are around the exams for every province in Canada. And I think that's where we got this information. So Ontario has made a decision about what all the schools will accept and what's required. And I think that that's where we got this information. So we don't decide that as a program. That's decided provincially and nationally as to what is required for people.
And with that, is the CASPER exam needed for pediatrics at U of T? I don't think it has in the past, yeah.
No.
Okay, the next question that we got is, how do you judge Canadian letters versus international letters?
This is a great question. And having read thousands and thousands of reference letters over the last many years, one thing that I've come to understand is that different types of folks write their letters very differently. And some countries, the physicians in some countries are effusive with their praise, and some countries are more reserved and could mean the exact same thing in terms of their endorsement of a candidate as the person who was effusive, who was from another country. So it is a little challenging when we read them. Sometimes I'll read a letter and I'll go, does this person even know the candidate? Like, it's just, and of course you guys have no control over that because you ask for the letters and you don't see them. And that's actually a CARMS rule, is that you do not see the letter. So we really try to, that's why we ask for 3 to 5 letters. So we have enough information from the reference letter so that at least something sort of stands out. I don't think you necessarily have to have reference letters from Canada, because many of you may not have had clinical experiences here where someone could speak to that. So I do think many of you will get letters from your home institutions, if you've done residency, from your residency programs, if you're done medical school, maybe from your equivalent of clerkship or internship years. And I think, you know, the message to folks would be, many of them now are getting to know how letters are written in Canada. Canadians are very effusive with their praise. So if you have an opportunity to let your preceptor know that, you know, if you could just maybe look at some examples of letters, the way people write. So, you know, for example, when if someone in Canada starts writing about how punctual or not someone was for clinic, or speaks about how well groomed they were, that usually means they can't find anything else good to say. So, there's kind of these little things in letters where you go, why are they talking about that? Oh, that must be a red flag. So I do think that there is, some advantage to them knowing their audience that are going to be reading these letters, to let them know, I'm applying to this very competitive stream. It'd be great if you could speak to if you feel comfortable. You're not obviously telling them what to write, but if you could speak to my clinical skills, my ability to work with others, and maybe give them some examples of when you worked together, just to remind them, because it may have been a while. I have found, I was reading some letters recently. Zayed was helping us with the process of, we just interviewed our visa trainees. And what I find is when I see letters from the Middle East, from people who I know through my clinical work, for example, I have colleagues there who I know, who we interact with a lot in meetings and things, or some of my former residents are now staff and chiefs of divisions there. They, having spent some time here, they write letters just like Canadians. Like they are, they know kind of the things to write. So, so you might want to take that into account just as you ask people. At the end of the day, though, I can speak only for our program. We totally understand that some people just don't totally know what to write. Some of them just write, they came, they did a good job. I'd love to have them work with us. And we will not penalize people, but we do need to get some information. So we hope that the other letters will have a little bit more in them if one or two of them are just not as long or don't have as much information, which is why we give you the opportunity to submit as many as 5 letters, which is a lot, right? So most programs, it's only 3. So it's a lot for us to read, but that's the reason, is so that we'll hopefully from all of them be able to pull out those really key things. But it's getting better. I find over the years it's getting better.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I mean, when I applied, I had letters from people at my home institution in the UK. And I do agree, like, I remember I got a letter for a different reason, and I could actually see this letter of recommendation, and it was, oh, Jackson. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Gabe.
Okay. Yeah, I remember seeing the letter, and it was 2 sentences saying, I endorse this medical student. So what I actually ended up doing was like finding examples of letters online. And I think UBC had a resource for preceptors for writing letters. And I actually sent that to the people I was requesting letters for, just so we were on the same page in terms of what a letter in Canada is. So at the end of the day, I don't know what my letters showed, but I think that was helpful for them to know, what the expectations were.
I think with that too is a lot like the CanMed stuff. A lot of international docs don't necessarily know what CanMeds is. So I found like sending them the website with all the CanMeds stuff was super helpful for them. So if they wanted to kind of use that within their reference letter, that would be super helpful too. And CARMS has like the cover letter that you can, that you're supposed to send with your reference request. So that's like super helpful as well, like similar to what Gabe was saying.
Okay, so one of the questions that we got is, what is the number of spots available for Canadian IMGs and IMGs in general?
So this year we have 3 spots in the match for IMGs for pediatrics. I think across the University of Toronto, I hope I'm not misspeaking, I think in all of the 72 training programs at U of T, there's something like 20 something, I think. They're sort of distributed, like some programs, if they're small, might have 1, and some programs that are a bit larger might have 3 like us, or even 4, like in internal medicine would have more, and family medicine would have more. I might be wrong. I'll try to find the exact numbers for U of T. Across Canada, I can't speak to the other provinces. I'm pretty sure that, and you guys may know from applying, I think most of the PEDS programs do have at least a couple of IMG spots. Like I'm just trying to think of my colleagues out west. Like I feel like, like Ottawa, Alberta, Ottawa's of course in Ontario, but Alberta, and as we get out to the West Coast, I feel like maybe a couple of spots each. Does that sound right, guys?
Yeah, I know like in my year, so it might be a little bit different, but in my year, so I don't know, what's that, 2 years ago now, out west, UBC had one, Saskatchewan had one. I wasn't able to apply to Alberta just because you have to like live there for a year and there's a bunch of other steps, unfortunately. And most of the programs I think all the programs in Ontario definitely have one spot. The numbers kind of fluctuate every year. And then unfortunately, there's no spots out east, but McGill does have, I think McGill has a spot. Manitoba or Winnipeg has a spot. I don't know if Yolanda, you applied last year. I don't know if you have more up-to-date numbers than I do.
Yeah, so pretty similar to what you were saying with the spots out in the other provinces. As far as Ontario goes, last year, there were 3 at Mac, I think 2 at Ottawa, 2 at Western, and 1 in Kingston, and then the 4 at U of T.
I'm just looking on the CRUMS website, and it looks like this year's numbers will be published on November 23rd. So you can check back on the CRUMS website then. You can also currently look at kind of the archives and see how many spots there were for pediatrics in Canada. So last year, I think there were 17 across the country, and you can see the breakdown for universities specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So I have another question, and perhaps some of our IMGs on the line can answer this question. How did IMG find the transition to doing residency in Canada?
Sorry, can you clarify? You cut off for a second. Was the question, how did IMGs transition to practicing in Canada?
Yeah, I think the question is, how did IMGs find the transition starting a residency program in Canada? So Gabe, you can start if you like.
Yeah, so as I said, like I did 1 year of the foundation year, so I had some hands-on clinical experience. I will say at my university in particular, when I did medical school, it was very hands-off. So it was nice having that hands-on experience as a foundation year doctor. I kind of started on the general pediatric ward, which is kind of known as being the busier rotation. So I feel like I was kind of thrown in the deep end, but I actually found, my senior was very supportive. I met with them actually beforehand and kind of talked through how a day on general pediatrics runs. I remember my first call, I had no idea what the expectations were. And I was concerned. I was like, do I stay on the ward the whole time? Do I go to my call room? What do I do? But the senior resident and everyone else there, kind of guided me through that. And I remember, when I was doing general pediatrics as a senior, like this past year, my R1 was an IMG as well. And he had a very similar thought about, what do I do? I'm really nervous. What are the expectations? So, I think it's common to kind of have those thoughts, uncertainties. I really didn't think that I could stay up for 24 hours. And you definitely can. So I think, the transition differs for everyone. I think there is definitely a transition for everyone, but your senior residents know that they're there to support you. And I found that everyone was really helpful.
Yeah, I think also, Gabe, I had pretty similar experience where I started on the general pediatrics ward. And I had, almost no idea about how the hospital works and what's expected of me. But, my senior residents and the staff were also very supportive and very understanding. And they had recognized that, I had come from a completely different system. And so everyone was very understanding and supportive in helping me transition.
I don't know if Yolanda or Warner, you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I would just echo what both Gabe and Ahmed said. I mean, I think any big career transition in your life is going to come with a certain amount of anxiety. And I definitely felt that coming into PGY1 in a completely different healthcare system, completely different hospital, very great, but kind of complicated EMR to learn at the beginning. There's a lot of like administrative stuff that just takes you a little bit longer to figure out than some of the other people that might have dealt with the system in the past. But as Gabe and Ahmed mentioned, like you're so well supported the entire time. I don't think I ever felt like I was unsupported at any point in first year when I was figuring all of this out. You definitely have anxiety, but it fades with time. And by the time you enter second year, you'll feel kind of right on par with everybody else, I think.
Yeah, I might just echo what Warner said, I'm one of the PGY ones. I don't think I mentioned that at the beginning, but so still kind of in that transition phase, I guess. I also started on the ward, which can be really intimidating, especially since I didn't have any clinical experience after med school or outside of my clerkship in Ireland. But I was completely supported the entire time, like amazing seniors, amazing staff, and fellows as well. My first call shift was with a fellow who was also new, and everyone else who was on call was supporting us in any way we needed. So really there's no time where I've ever felt like I was unsupported or couldn't ask a question. So it's really been huge for me from a growth perspective already, and I think would be great for anyone coming to the program.
I will quickly add, even now, like before I go on a call shift, before I start an emerge shift, like there is a little bit of anxiety still. And I think that's good. Residency is a huge time for growth. And you want to have those feelings of feeling a little bit anxious. Obviously there's someone supporting you, and if you need to reach out, there's someone to help you, but you do want that kind of feeling of, I wouldn't say uncertainty, but discomfort, because that's how you grow, that's how you become a stronger physician. Everyone is always there to support you. You're never alone. There's always so many people in the hospital there for you. So you never are just alone managing a sick patient by yourself.
And I guess something to kind of echo, and something that I kind of noticed transitioning from Ireland to Canada was, again, all the support, but like being able to like text your staff or call your staff in the middle of the night, your fellow, your senior, where like in I trained, that wasn't really how it went. So it was super, like, it was just refreshing to have that support. And like, I think that's one of the big positives about training here in Canada, which was super helpful. And I think for anyone transitioning into practice, it's all kind of the same things we feel. Like Warner said, like transitioning to a new EMR, like how does the hospital work? Like, I don't know, Kelsey, you can probably talk to this because you trained at Western. So like, it's a whole different hospital as well. So some of those things that we feel are also the same that a lot of the CMGs are feeling. I don't know if Kelsey, you kind of felt the same, or even Ziad, like transitioning from international as well.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that I totally felt the same way. I feel like, you're coming, I trained at Western, which is close by, but a very different system, a different hospital. You don't know where the emerge is, all of these different things. So you're kind of all in it together, and your senior residents went through the same process 2 years ago. So you're very supported in making that transition. But I would certainly say, coming from another Canadian medical school, I definitely still felt there was a lot of that piece that I had to learn and catch up on. And no matter where you trained before,
I think your connection cut off, Kelsey.
Kelsey has some unstable internet.
So honestly, like I agree. Like I think no matter how much time you spend, like in any career, you would still have this anxiety. But I would say one of the best things about this program and training here is actually having this support all the time. so that was really helpful in that transitioning period.
I would maybe just add one thing that hasn't been mentioned, but I think oftentimes the like size of the residency program and the amount of fellow learners and fellows is looked at as a potential downside to the program. But I think actually in this context, I see it as a benefit of the program. I've heard from other friends at smaller residency programs that you don't necessarily have the same level of fellow and co-resident support, like overnight on call shifts, as we do here. So just to put that out there.
And I think too with that is that a lot of these fellows or other trainees are like internationals. So a lot of them might have been like, you know, pediatricians in their own country or whatnot. So, you know, they bring a different level of experience, and just as you guys will bring experience from your countries, which I think is super interesting and a huge benefit as an IMG. You know, and I think integrating that into kind of as you transition is also super helpful. Yeah, I think I might move on to the next question. So maybe Dr. A, you can probably help with this, but are there any common pitfalls in IMG applications versus those that you see in the CMG applications?
That's a great question. I think one of the things we see in both, probably equally, is how things are annotated on the CARMS, in that sort of CARMS sort of CD type of platform you have to put everything in. So sometimes, for example, under publications, people will put presentations, sometimes just presenting rounds, etc. So I would just be really careful to make sure that wherever you put things, it's the actual right section. So sometimes I'll see, the way we see it, it'll say, you know, publications 25, and I'll be like, wow. And I open it up and it's actually not 25 publications, it's presentations at a teaching rounds. So just make sure that wherever you put things, it's in the right place. The last thing you want is the person reviewing your application to get annoyed because they have to go looking for stuff. So annotating things properly, I think, is important. So publications, of course, platform presentations, abstracts should go where they should go. And then presentations, there is a section where you can sort of put that stuff. The other thing we find sometimes with IMGs is they tend to list under electives. Sometimes people have listed under the electives portion every single rotation they did in what we know to be clerkship. And we can tell because it's 1 month after another, and it's internal medicine, it's OB-GYN, it's pediatrics, it's definitely, and it's way too long to just be electives or otherwise that's all you're doing in your entire training is electives. So I think people are trying to find a place to put their internships or their clerkship stuff, and they sometimes put it under electives, but we can tell it's not really electives. So just make sure electives are truly electives. And for that part, for your clerkship, some people will put it under, I think there's a part where you can put clerkship, and they'll put, you know, did a wide variety of rotations, including, and you can kind of like almost type them in a paragraph, like OB-GYN, internal medicine, general surgery, whatever. And it was from this date to this date. So it was like a year, it was 2 years, it was a year and a half, whatever. So I think that's one thing that we have difficulty sieving through, because some person will have like 8 weeks of electives and this and that makes sense. And then someone will have like a year and a half, and we're like, wait a second, that can't be right. So just making sure that you really differentiate what was an elective and what was your actual training, your required training. We also understand that some programs maybe don't have something called elective. So just let us know that, and so we can sort of sift through that. So those are a couple things that I do find maybe people misunderstand a little bit. So just making sure everything's annotated properly.
Okay, so one of the questions that we got, we'd like to know about a time when a program faced a challenge and how the program overcame it.
All right. You guys can feel free to weigh in too. Which one should I use is the is the question. Okay, let me think. I think we did come up with some examples that we thought we might use.
Yeah, I remember in the last session we talked about the Maple Oak changes to that call schedule and having
when we went from more people to less people, that one.
I was talking about more recently with having like a scut work board
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's a great example, and it's a little more current. So that's a great example, Gabe. Do you want to outline what the issues were and what we kind of did about it?
Yeah, so actually maybe I'll hand it over to one of the R2s who probably use.
They worked on this. That's right.
Yeah.
I was on Maple Call last night, so I can talk a little bit about this. So basically, like Gabe was saying earlier, our calls in PGY2 are kind of split up into two groups, so Oak and Maple. And on Maple, you cover a multiple of different services. So last night I was covering cardiology, endocrinology, GI, transplant, and nephrology. And one of the wards is kind of a mix of all of these specialties. And what we were finding was a lot of the times nurses were paging us with non-urgent issues very frequently. So like, you'd hang up the phone and then you get a page from a nurse on the same ward. And we found this, very time consuming and not very efficient in order to kind of manage these calls appropriately. So we kind of put together our thoughts, and we went to our chiefs and Dr. A, and we said, this is what we've been noticing. And we've came up with the idea of having a call board. So basically the nurses will write their name and, whatever the non-urgent issue is. And then every so often the resident will go by the board or go by the ward, try to manage some of those kind of non-urgent issues. So this way you're kind of batching all your calls as opposed to getting like 1,000,001 calls every 5 minutes. And it seems to be working. This is only my second Maple call, so I don't know what it was like prior, but from what I've heard from other residents, it definitely has made a difference. So that's a good positive change, and something that happened quite fast within our year. So we found this problem, like we went to the chiefs, went to Dr. A, and like within, a few weeks, this new call board was made, which was fantastic.
I should point out that this has been an ongoing issue since I was a resident, and we've not been able to fix it until these guys came along. And we tried other things, and somehow we always went back to the mean. Like we always went back to the mean. And we kind of I remember being literally saying to the nurses who were my friends, I'd be like, oh my God, you literally were standing beside the person who just called me. Like you were standing right next to them. Like I literally can't even go to the bathroom right now. And they were like, really? And we couldn't fix it. Like we tried all these different things, and somehow these guys have made it work. So so that's a great example. We've had some examples of things that were, real concerns for us from a leadership point of view that I had to kind of punt up the food chain a little bit, like the learning environment. So we had issues a number of years ago, and the really struggling times, I think, of this issue were even predated these guys, but they've hopefully reaped the benefits, where we actually had to change our rotation pretty significantly and remove residents due to a learning environment that had nothing to do with them, but they were really caught in the middle of a situation that needed to be mended. We gave the rotation a bit of time to mend it. We tried to support them in mending it. It did not mend. And so we made some changes, and I think for the better. So we do pull in the people we need to make those changes. I think one of the things we're really fortunate about at the University of Toronto is that our program is really held in high regard by our leadership in the Department of Pediatrics. It's considered kind of the jewel in the crown, if you will. So when there's a problem, especially one to the degree of the learning environment, intimidation, harassment, anything like that, which fortunately is extremely rare in our environment, but does happen, people listen, that those things start to get addressed within 24 hours. There's, we don't wait till the end of the year to hear about it on a retreat report. Those things are addressed really quickly. And I just think we're lucky because people listen, and they see the residency program for what it is. This is what we do. We train people, and we have to create an environment that is healthy and well, so that we can do a good job for our patients. So we're very fortunate that people listen. And I do talk to colleagues in other disciplines and I don't know that they always get the support they need from higher up, but we have a chair who basically says, we've got your back.
Okay, I think we're going to move into our breakout room session now.